31. Seagroves held the wine goblet at arm's length, then turned it gently in his fingers, letting the brilliance of the metal catch and reflect the flames of the hissing gas mantle. He brought the cup to his lips, letting the fragrance of the iridescent green brandy caress his nostrils. Cabalos was a taste it took some getting used to, but Seagroves was making significant progress. He liked being important, and he felt he was finally getting what he deserved. He'd gotten his first inkling of what was there for the taking just after he'd first landed in the square of Usagumo. He smiled at the memory. How different that first encounter would have been if he'd known then what he knew now. But the past was past, and right now he was doing just fine. He let the Cabolos roll over his palate. Still a little too sweet for his taste, but if this was what the residents of this planet thought was luxury, that was good enough for him. From the hearth came the warmth of the fire his servants had built against the late summer chill. The day had been dim with low clouds, and at this hour the fog was sweeping in from the river. The dance and radiance of the flames gave a ruddy glow to the room, setting off the dull brilliance of the golden accoutrements. Every metal object in the room was of gold. Seagroves had seen to that. He loved the look and feel of the heavy metal. If it couldn't be gold, he had told his hosts, he didn't want it made of any other metal. The grate that held the lumps of glowing coal was ceramic. On the mahogany table that supported his feet were scattered piles of golden objects. They weren't what anyone on this planet would call art, since artistic items were usually made of the less plentiful iron. Brian Seagroves didn't care. He wanted gold, and it didn't matter to him what shape it came in. It was the gold that was important. He let another sip of Cabolos slide down his throat. There was a sharp knock at the door, followed almost immediately by the appearance of Elizabeth Hoond. Seagroves glanced up, his eyes dancing in the light of the gas lamps. Hoond looked grim to the point of fury, her brows knit together in a deep crease, her shoulders rigid with anger. Seagroves was mildly disturbed that she had not waited permission to enter, but decided not to say anything. There would be plenty of opportunity to dig at Hoond. "Why so glum?" he said with a smile, pushing the golden salver toward her. "Have some Caballos. It takes getting used to, but it's got a pretty good kick after a one or two. You look like you could use some." Hoon stalked into the room, slamming the door behind her. She reached for the crystal decanter and a goblet so roughly that some of the golden objects scattered across the table and rolled off to hit the floor. Without batting an eyelash, Hoon poured herself a glass and took a long draught of the iridescent brew. She drained the goblet, then poured herself another. "Is this all you plan to do tonight?" she asked venomously. "Just sit here and swill this stuff?" "I'm not the only one doing the swilling," retorted Seagroves, lowering his feet to the floor and retrieving the fallen objects. "But yes, if the truth be known, that's exactly what I plan to do. I'm just a minor cog in the great scheme of things. Just a technician with special abilities." "Bull!" Hoon spat the word out as though it had physical force. "Just because I've been recognized for my worth in this society is no reason for you or the others to be jealous. It's quite unseemly of you." "Bull! And again, bull! I don't know why they think you're so hot. You fly a lamb. A lamb! I'm the navigator of a starship that travels to and from worlds dozens of light years apart. I've been to the outer fringes of the known galaxy. I even have my license from the Intergalactic Mariners Union to serve as master of any vessel, any area. That's a far sight more important than the pilot of a stinking lamb." "Tut, tut, my dear Elizabeth Hoond. You make too much of yourself. You may be able to navigate a jump ship between any two known points, but you cannot fly. And that's what counts here. And I can. These silly, simple people have no concept of star travel. They have no idea of your high and mighty importance. Seagroves leaned across the table almost into the face of the navigator. But they understand what I do. There was ice in his voice. And don't you ever forget it. To them, I'm more powerful and important than Garba Vost. He may tell us what to do now, but if it ever comes down to a choice, I'm the one who will be able to cut the better deal. They respect me. They love me. They worship that stupid lamb is all. It's got nothing to do with you. A mere accident of fate put you in this position. Remember, Vost can fly the lamb too. Just because these people had to abandon their jump ship 500 years ago, and just because they've come to revere it as some starry home of the gods and so don't fly, is no reason they should think of you as some kind of god. She poured herself another glass of Caballos. We saw the wrecked ship when we entered this system. That's all it is, a wrecked ship. It's no mysterious home of the gods. Well, go ahead and try telling them that, and see how far you get. As for me, I'm perfectly happy here surrounded by their ignorance, and I plan to push that ignorance as far as I can. You're just jealous. You certainly have had some luck. Hund examined the golden fixtures around the room. You're getting yourself quite a hoard. You bet. These people don't understand its value, but I do. I'm going to be the richest man in the galaxy when this is over. So wealthy you won't even recognize me. But don't worry, Lizzie. I'll pay attention to you, even if Vost won't. Pig, she said in an even voice. Seagroves could see that his comment had struck home. Hund was not a steady member of Vost's entourage. Seagroves didn't know what status she craved, but she wasn't number one to anybody. She certainly wasn't important to Sirayuki, not even a little bit. In Usagumo, women were nothing more than servants. I prefer the title Divine Lord, or perhaps King of all he envisions, to the term pig. What makes you think you'll ever be able to get off this stinking planet and away from these stinking people? Don't you get it? We're stuck here for eternity. What's all that gold worth then? Hund poured herself another goblet of Caballos, draining the decanter, then set it back down on the table with a solid thump. We're all stuck here forever. They'll plant our bones in the stinking muck by the river and let us sink in. It's hopeless. No, I don't believe that. You've had too much Caballos, and now I'll have to get more. On your way out, tell that little girl at the desk I need some. I've got plans to make. Elizabeth Hoon drained the last of her drink and stood up. Staggered up. She had the momentary desire to throw the goblet at Seagroves, but in her current condition, she was sure she'd miss. And what was the use, she thought? Aside from the personal satisfaction of bouncing the thing off his face, she'd gained nothing by the action. She turned to the door. Next time you come, said Seagroves, as Hoon put her hand on the knob, you might try waiting for permission before barging in. Hoon turned to the blurry figure in the chair. Stupid lout, she thought. Then she threw the goblet at the fuzzy pink circle above the body. Seagroves dodged the spinning goblet. His comment about barging in was as much a warning to Hoon as to himself. There was no lock on the door, and that meant that anyone could enter this room at any time. It was not a good place to hide his cache of gold, a pile that seemed to be growing by the hour. He had removed his clothes from the wooden armoire in the corner and was using it to store the bigger items he'd accumulated. He had contemplated tearing out the golden tubing that was used to bring the gas into his room, but had decided against it. The management of the hostelry might become suspicious about something like that. There were other ways to store it, and there were safer places. Luckily, Seagroves had found a jeweler on one of the Enclave's side streets who was willing to turn the objects Seagroves brought him into chains. The pilot had spent most of his considerable free time combing stores in search of accessories. The little jeweler had rubbed his head in disbelief when Seagroves approached him, but such was the reputation of the Lamb pilot that no one questioned his actions. The people in the stores hadn't even asked payment for the things he took. This being a demigod was all right, Seagroves thought smugly. The first of the chains, which had arrived only today, were now wrapped around the pilot's neck. Vos had made a disparaging comment at the sight of them, but as far as Seagroves was concerned, the mercenary commander could stuff it. Seagroves was going to be rich. Vos was losing it, in Seagroves' opinion. SirArminius was paying less and less attention to the commander and more to him. Seagroves loved it. Vos was such a cocky bastard. It served him right to eat a little humble pie. All he'd ever done was boss everyone around. Now maybe he'd be a little less sure of himself. Sooner or later, thought Seagroves, SirArminius would deal with him rather than Vos. Then things would be different. The Lamb pilot rose from his chair and moved to the door to listen for movement in the hall beyond. He heard the soft patter of the serving girl coming toward his room. Hund had evidently told her to bring more caballos. It was a sure sign of his new importance that Hund would have remembered to give her the orders, and another sign that the girl would respond so quickly. He was sitting in his chair when the servant entered and placed a full decanter on the table, retrieving the empty one as she left. He checked for noise again, and hearing nothing, quietly opened the door. A soft glow of gaslight lit the end of the corridor where the concierge was stationed, but the jets in the hall had been turned down to almost nothing. The area clear, Seagroves picked up the heavy bag of gold he'd hidden in the closet, and silently padded down the hall away from the servant. He was headed toward the mech bastion to add to the ever-growing stash of items he kept buried there. Sooner or later, he knew, he'd have to establish another, more secure hoard. The only place left was in the storage bins of the Lamb itself. The gold's extra weight might make the Lamb a bit unstable in flight, but it would be safe there because the bins would only open to his palm print. For the moment, the bins would have to do. He wasn't worried. The future looked as bright as the gold itself. The great thing about keeping the gold at the bastion was that no one would ever suspect its presence. The mercenary techs were now housed in inns like this one. Not as good, but comfortable nonetheless. He was in a better place than even Vos had managed to acquire, a fact that had made the mercenary commander grind his teeth. When Vos had mentioned it to SirArminius, the smiling Shadosha only tucked his hands into his sleeves and shrugged. There was nothing he could do about it, he had explained. It was all voluntary. The Usagumo guards, who now patrolled the bastion outside but not inside, were totally accustomed to the comings and goings of the pilots. They would report his presence to no one.